Ew, who's up for some spicy historical tales? Hi, I'm your host, bringing you the craziest stories from human history. And today we're talking about Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, the classic tale of a king's obsession with his mistress, and how he completely dumps his wife to marry her. But there's more to the story than you might think. So grab a goblet and join me, won't you? Join me as we spill the royal tea on one of history's most infamous royal Chapter 1. A Royal Flirtation. So the year is 1526, and King Henry VIII of England, who is most likely the reason you clicked on this video because you have impeccable taste, is in need of a mistress. Now, if you don't know much about Henry, let me catch you up. The man was a notorious womanizer. He had affairs with women both inside and outside of marriage, even while being married to Anne of Cleves at the time. And apparently he was still looking to add another name to his long list of lovers. Enter Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting to Queen Anne of Cleves. While she was only a lady-in-waiting, she wasn't exactly low on the social rungs. She was actually the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, the English ambassador to France, and Elizabeth I's aunt. Through her family's connections, Anne had spent most of her life in France and was well versed in the ways of the French court. In fact, when Anne of Cleves entered the English court, it was Anne Boleyn who served as her translator. So the two women were bound to get along. And although Anne of Cleves was nowhere near the top of Henry's affection list, she was quite fond of him. In fact, she enjoyed his company so much that she chose him over her old suitor, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who would later become Charles I, of course. Henry was flattered by the choice, but he was already smitten with another woman. Henry first set eyes on her when she entered the English court as part of Anne of Cleves' entourage, and he immediately thought she was hot enough to make him break with the Catholic Church, abandon his sick wife and divorce her just 6 months into their marriage. Talk about a good catch. Seriously. I mean, look at her. What an absolute fox. And it didn't take Henry long to make his move. He began showering her with gifts, including expensive jewelry and clothing, as well as a beautiful home in London. But Anne wasn't interested in being just another one of Henry's She wanted more. And what she really wanted was Henry himself. See, Anne wasn't just a pretty face. She was also incredibly intelligent and ambitious. Unlike many of Henry's other lovers, she knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. Chapter 2. A Secret Wedding. Now, as you may have heard, Henry and Anne's relationship became a bit more complicated when Anne got pregnant. And no, I'm not talking about a complicated love affair. I'm talking about the fact that Henry wasn't actually married when Anne conceived. So depending on when the conception happened, the child could either be Henry's illegitimate son or the future King of England. See, at the time, Henry was still married to Anne of Cleves, although they hadn't consummated their marriage, and he needed to make sure that the baby was really his, before he did anything rash like, getting rid of his wife or starting a war with the Pope. To solve this little dilemma, Henry and Anne decided to get secretly married. Yes, you heard me right. They got hitched in secret. And by secret, I mean in secret. Even though Henry was desperate to tie the knot with Anne, he couldn't risk the scandal of a public wedding, so he asked his friend, the Bishop of London, to marry them in secret, which he did on January 25th, 1533. This meant that Anne was now Henry's wife in all but name, and that any child she bore would be legitimate. It also gave Henry a way out of his marriage to Anne of Cleves, since he could now claim that he had never been married to her in the first place. But before he could do any of that, he had to deal with one small problem. The fact that Anne of Cleves still lived in his palace, and everyone thought that she was his wife. So Henry hatched a plan to get rid of her once and for all. He invited Anne of Cleves to a party and told her that he wanted to show her a new dress that he had bought her. But when she arrived at his chambers, instead of a dress, she found a black veil. It was then that Henry broke the news to her that they were no longer man and wife, and that she was free to find another husband. Of course, Anne of Cleves was devastated. She had loved Henry and had no idea that he was planning to get rid of her. But what could she do? Henry was the king and he had made his decision. In the end, Henry gave Anne of Cleves a noble title and a hefty sum of money, and she went on to live a quiet life as a nun. And that, my friends, is why it's important to have a You never know when your spouse might kick the bucket. Now that Anne of Cleves was out of the picture, Henry and Anne Boleyn were free to make their relationship public. And boy, did they do it in style. The newly married couple embarked on a victory tour of England, where they were greeted as king and queen. Everywhere they went, people celebrated their arrival with feasts and games, and Henry even had medals minted in Anne's honor. Finally, It seemed that Anne had gotten everything she ever wanted. She was now the Queen of England, the most powerful woman in the kingdom. But it wouldn't last. See, despite their public displays of affection, things weren't exactly going smoothly behind closed doors. For one thing, Anne was having trouble getting pregnant, and Henry, well, he was still a pig. In fact, he would soon add another notch to his bedpost, this time with one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, which wouldn't have been such a big deal if Anne was not already feeling a bit insecure about her status. As it was, she saw the new baby as a threat and was determined to get rid of her. And that brings us to chapter 3, the fall of a queen. The paranoia and jealousy were getting to Anne's head, and she started acting erratically. She lashed out at Henry, accusing him of infidelity and generally making a nuisance of herself. And you know what they say about the codependency of kings and queens? Oh wait, that's not a real saying. That's something I just came up with, but it's true. Like most couples who are super invested in each other, Henry and Anne's relationship was a bit of a bumpy ride. But eventually, things took a turn for the worse, and they officially went their separate ways. In May of 1536, no, I'm just kidding. Things got so bad that Henry had her arrested on charges of adultery and incest. Apparently she had slept with her brother, George, which was both gross and a huge no-no in Tudor England. To make matters worse, she was also accused of trying to kill the king by poisoning him. Although the evidence against her was shaky at best, Henry was determined to make an example of her. And on May 1536, she was executed by a sword and beheaded in front of a crowd of onlookers. I mean, talk about a dramatic exit. But don't worry, she didn't go down without a fight. Before she met her demise, she gave birth to Henry's son, who would later become King Edward VI. So in the end, it all worked out for her, right? After Anne's execution, Henry wasted no time finding a new flame and married one of his wives, Jane Seymour. And unlike his previous marriages, this one actually lasted until Jane's death in childbirth. But that doesn't mean that Henry stopped mourning Anne. In fact, he continued to praise her in songs and sonnets. Even after he married one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, yeah, you heard me right, the king was back to square one. But hey, at least he had his poetry. And that, my friends, is why it's important to choose your mistresses wisely. You never know when she might just end up on the throne. And if she does, you'd better make sure that she's not the jealous type. Thank you for joining me today. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to tune in next time for more spicy historical tales. Until then, stay thirsty, my friends.